One man, one desk, and losses so large they erased a bank that had survived 2 centuries. Most financial institutions take decades to collapse. Barings Bank took weeks. And when investigators finally pieced together what had happened, they discovered something far more unsettling than a rogue trader. They discovered a system designed, almost perfectly, to let catastrophe go unnoticed. This is the story of how one of Britain's oldest financial institutions failed, not because one person broke the rules, but because the rules were never strong enough to stop him. For most of its 233-year history, Barings Bank stood as a monument to financial stability. Founded in 1762, the institution had helped finance the Louisiana Purchase, survived 2 world wars, and earned a reputation serious enough to make governments and monarchies its clients. The firm had also survived a near collapse in 1890, when losses on Argentine sovereign debt brought it to the edge of ruin. The Bank of England organized a rescue. Barings endured. That history of institutional survival only deepened the confidence surrounding it. By the early 1990s, the firm had expanded aggressively into Asian derivatives markets. Singapore had become a key operational base, and Barings Futures Singapore was generating what appeared to be remarkable profits from a theoretically low-risk strategy, arbitraging small price differences in Nikkei futures contracts across 2 exchanges. Nobody questioned the numbers too hard. The profits were real, the confidence was real, and the oversight, as investigators would later confirm, was not. Inside Barings Futures Singapore, a trader named Nick Leeson had been granted an unusual degree of authority. He managed both the trading desk and the back-office settlement operations, 2 functions that virtually every financial institution kept deliberately separate. That separation existed for one reason: control. If the same person executes trades and records them, there is no independent verification. There is no check. What management in London did not know was that Leeson had previously been refused registration as a trader by the Securities and Futures Authority in the United Kingdom, due to an undisclosed county court judgment. That background check had never been completed for his Singapore appointment. The system had failed before the trading even began. Investigators later concluded that this concentration of authority, combined with inadequate scrutiny of the individual holding it, was the foundational crack inside which everything else would collapse. The immediate problem began in 1992. A trading error by a colleague resulted in a loss of approximately £20,000. Rather than report it through official channels, Leeson concealed it inside a little-used internal account number 88888, originally created for minor administrative corrections. What began as a maneuver to avoid embarrassment became a habit, then a strategy, then a spiral. Each subsequent loss was hidden inside the same account. Each concealment required a larger position to recover. And because Leeson controlled both sides of the reporting process, the account remained invisible to London. According to the Board of Banking Supervision's 1995 inquiry, Barings senior management received reports showing the Singapore operation generating consistent profits. What those reports concealed was the rapidly growing liability accumulating beneath them. The declared strategy looked legitimate. The hidden account told a different story entirely. By January 1995, the hidden losses had grown to an estimated figure in excess of £200 million, according to later reconstructions of the account's history. Leeson made an enormous bet across Nikkei 225 futures and related instruments, effectively wagering that Japanese markets would remain stable. He had also sold options that left him dangerously exposed to any significant movement in either direction. On January 17, 1995, the Great Hanshin earthquake struck Japan. The Nikkei dropped sharply. The positions moved catastrophically against him. The losses accelerated. Leeson continued adding to his positions, attempting to trade his way out of the deficit. The account continued hemorrhaging capital that Barings did not know it was obligated to cover. By the time questions about the margin calls could no longer be deferred, the total losses, later confirmed at approximately £827 million, had already exceeded the firm's entire available capital. When investigators arrived, they were not looking for a single smoking gun. They were trying to reconstruct how an institution, employing hundreds of professionals across multiple continents, had failed to notice losses accumulating for nearly 3 years. On February 23, 1995, Leeson fled Singapore, leaving behind a handwritten note. According to widely reported accounts, it expressed a simple apology. The following day, Barings suspended trading. On February 26, it was declared insolvent. The Board of Banking Supervision took the lead in London. Singapore's authorities moved simultaneously. The Serious Fraud Office opened an investigation in the United Kingdom, though criminal proceedings there did not result in charges against individuals. What both teams discovered pointed to the same structural failure approached from different angles. The evidence pointed somewhere unexpected. Investigators did not find an elaborate conspiracy. They found something more uncomfortable, a system that had failed across multiple layers simultaneously. The Board of Banking Supervision's report identified that senior management had been aware Leeson occupied dual roles, but had not treated that arrangement as a material risk. The organization's internal auditors had flagged the concentration of authority in Singapore in a 1994 report. Management acknowledged the concern. The separation was never implemented. The inquiry also noted significant communication failures between Singapore and London. Assurances about the operation's performance had been accepted without adequate verification. The volume of margin calls should have triggered serious scrutiny months before the collapse. The uncomfortable truth was that exceptional profit figures had reduced the institution's appetite for questioning how those profits were being generated. The organization trusted the results without interrogating the process. Nick Leeson was convicted in Singapore of deceiving auditors and sentenced to 6.5 years imprisonment. He was released in 1999 on medical grounds. The collapse represented losses of approximately £827 million. Thousands of employees lost their jobs. The Bank of England's attempted rescue found no buyer willing to absorb the full liability. ING, the Dutch financial group, eventually acquired Barings for £1, assuming its debts and gradually dismantling the original operation. The Barings name, which had endured for over 2 centuries, disappeared from active banking entirely. What investigators had uncovered inside Barings forced regulators to ask a question the entire industry had been avoiding. What happens when the failure isn't in the market, but inside the institution itself? At the time of the collapse, the international banking framework under Basel I required no capital specifically against operational failures. That changed. Regulators elevated operational risk, the possibility that an institution's own processes, people, or systems could generate losses into a distinct and formally capitalized category under the later Basel II framework. The separation of front-office trading and back-office settlement became a non-negotiable structural requirement across major markets. Independent risk management functions with direct board reporting lines were strengthened. The expectation that senior management would actively investigate the source of exceptional profits, not simply record them, became embedded in governance standards. The collapse of Barings is remembered as the story of a rogue trader. But the investigation told a different story. It told the story of an organization that built profit targets without building the controls to verify how those profits were being achieved. It told the story of auditors who identified a weakness, management that acknowledged it, and nobody who acted. It told the story of warning signals, margin calls, a single individual occupying incompatible roles, a background check that was never completed, that were each individually explainable and collectively catastrophic. The system did not fail because one person was dishonest. It failed because it had been constructed in a way that made dishonesty invisible. That distinction matters, because the same structural conditions, concentrated authority, inadequate separation of duties, governance that trusts outcomes without interrogating processes, exist inside organizations today. The failure was never just the moment everything broke. It was everything that made the breaking inevitable. Which institution do you think carries a hidden structural weakness that nobody is examining closely enough right now? And what warning sign do you think people would only recognize in hindsight? Leave your thoughts in the comments. If you think this kind of investigation matters, subscribe to Null Theory, because the most dangerous failures are never the ones nobody saw coming. They are the ones everyone chose not to look at.